Welcome to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Tirant. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
So on this time's episode of Disrupt Your Career podcast, I'm really happy to be hosting today's guest, Michelle Prince. Michelle is what you might call a complete HR professional. She's tackled the subject of people and organizations from every angle, many geographies and multiple fields. And I'm really honored to have her on here with me today. Michelle, welcome. Thank you so much for making the time to join me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's get straight in with our absolutely unilaterally the first question all the time about your career journey. You've been through several pivots and challenges in your career, choosing HR as a calling, it would seem, from the outset, plying your trade in a wide variety of organizations across healthcare and IT, as well as human capital advisory services. And you also more recently set up your own coaching firm, while keeping active in advocacy around technology for the HR sector. Tell us how this extraordinary career unfolded, please. And do talk about whether it was by design or how much the role of serendipity has played. And of course, maybe give us some highlights, the moments of pride and the moments of challenge.
And I love the discussion about design or serendipity for a variety of reasons. But when I started in human resources, it was still called personnel. So now I'm really dating myself, but we didn't have computers even. It was a very paper-oriented personnel department. We had postings hanging on the wall and people would come in and actually fill out job applications with pen.
Unimaginable to some 20-something-year-olds these days, but yes, it existed.
It's been a journey. Yeah, my kids laugh when I say I remember the day we first got our fax machine and it completely changed the way we did recruiting. And they're like, what's a fax machine? So yeah, a lot has changed, computers and the advent of many different ways of doing HR. But I spent time in recruiting first, right out of college, moved into compensation and benefits. And by the way, if there's any HR aspiring folks, I highly recommend spending time in compensation. Really changes the way you think about human resources. Originally, was thinking about staying in the comp and ben area, got my master's, so quickly became a generalist. Actually, at that time, I did take on a senior role in compensation for a bit, and then was promoted a number of times into director level, senior director level. So my career itself probably followed a fairly straight career ladder within the HR function. The one thing that really was completely outside of HR was I had, during mid-career, had an opportunity to have an amazing international IT project assignment. I was assigned to the change management team. We were responsible for assessing readiness, communication, working with local teams, assessing organizational impact based on the new system that we were implementing from a business perspective. And it completely changed the trajectory of my career, frankly. It was 2.5 years of traveling to different countries, primarily around Europe. And I got a chance to really understand how the business was run. I loved it. I was so hooked on organization design, org development, and really set the groundwork for the global vice president, senior vice president roles I would continue to advance into. During that time, I was also, because I was traveling, I was raising 2 young boys. So really a lot of the home activities fell on the responsibility of my husband. So that also had a modification in the way that we were parenting. He ended up staying home more, whereas he was in a role that required a lot more travel. I like to say in the first 15 years of our marriage, he traveled. And in the second 15 years of our marriage, I traveled. Then COVID hit and nobody traveled.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Also, during that time, after pursuing the master's degree, I was still hungry for more. I became a certified leadership coach and got my doctorate in organizational leadership, all while being in these strategic leadership roles, the senior vice president roles around engagement, performance, learning and development, talent management, org effectiveness, all because my husband was taking on a lot of the responsibilities at home already, and it allowed me to just continue to be the lifelong learner that I am. And after I was finishing my second international assignment in a different company, I took on a role. My second assignment was head of global learning and development, and actually with a role based in Amsterdam. So my first international assignment was actually based in Georgia. So at least when I was coming home from my international assignment, I was home. When I was working in this role that was based in Amsterdam, I was home for usually 4 to 5 weeks at a time, and then out for 2 or 3 weeks. So I was kind of deployed, if you will, going around the world, helping leaders become the most effective leaders that they could be. All of this really led to my Encore career, which I know we'll talk about, but I ended up loving leadership development, leadership effectiveness, and really based on the fact that I knew and understood how businesses run because of that IT implementation, I've been able to really culminate all of my knowledge about what it takes to be a great leader in business and pull that into what I've been doing now for the last 4 years, which is my Encore career. And looking back at the frequent travel, I think I've been to around 25 countries at this point. So I really understand that people are people. There are cultural nuances for sure, but people are people. And I coach people all around the world now. And I do it virtually. Thanks to COVID, people have become much more comfortable working virtually as well. So that's really my journey in a nutshell. I've worked with some fantastic teams. I've been able to lead some incredible people who are so talented and in their own right now, leaders within HR functions. I've had the honor of working with many amazing leaders and learned a lot from them. Learned a lot from some of the very bad leaders that I've also had the opportunity to work with, really setting the foundation for what I do today.
Wonderful. I want to make an observation and thank you for an acknowledgement that you made. You shouldn't have to, but let's be realistic. In 2024, our bra-burning grandmothers are turning in their graves, wondering how we didn't make the progress as women that they've been battling for. The fact that you acknowledged that you were able to have that success in those second 15 years of your marriage and your career, thanks to the role that your husband took in staying at home, speaks volumes about you and your integrity. It also sadly speaks volumes about the fact that you have to say it or that not everybody else says it. But anyway, thank you. I think that it's rare to hear that. And of course, it allowed you to be a role model for other female leaders in the organizations you worked in. So well done. Thank you. And well done to your husband. Thank you.
Absolutely. We've raised 2 amazing boys, young men now that are men in their own right. They learned compassion and wonderful cooking from my husband and learned all about how to be a business-oriented leader. And they are becoming leaders in their own right as well. And it's so incredible that both of us are watching them flourish in their careers as well as in their personal lives. And I think that's maybe because of the role modeling we were able to do. So I think we can check that box.
Very impressive, wonderful, and very touching too. You also mentioned how strong that impact was of the IT transformation project that you got involved in, which opened up your eyes and ears and all your senses to how business is actually done. It's still relatively rare that HR and folk step out of the function and really go out and seek to understand deeply how a business works. You've clearly done that with great aplomb. And of course, it's given you a greater insight and connection with the very top leaders that you've worked alongside all this time, given you a role that is perhaps more strategic than is typical. You talked about lessons from good leaders, lessons from bad leaders. If you were to highlight perhaps one of each of the lessons that you've learned, what would they be?
One of the greatest lessons I learned from a leader who I would say not intentionally trying to be a poor leader, but just in his total naivety, just really was all about accelerating his own career. And it became obvious to the people who worked with him and for him and around him that this was his motivation and his driver. And I can look back on that now that I'm a coach, and I can really understand and appreciate the behaviors that he was demonstrating. But as someone who was on his team and not getting, let's say, the recognition and appreciation that I felt like the team deserved, and that I personally was really working hard to make him look good, and there was a lack of appreciation. And learning from that, I bring that own experience into my coaching. And when I'm helping leaders be the best leaders they can be, I ask them, what are the motivators of every individual on your team? And if they don't know, we dive deeply into that. Because some people do want their name on the marquee, and some people want a very quiet email saying thank you for this specific activity. And so it really depends. And great leaders understand that. Well, what matters most to the people, and how do you get the most from your team? How do you motivate them? How do you bring out the best in their potential? And it's just something I love doing when I'm leading some of those coaching conversations. Some that were ill-equipped or had huge blind spots that I can see now, I almost feel bad that nobody took the time to bring those to light. Yes, I worked in big, large global companies. We had 360s, but maybe people weren't being completely honest. Or maybe they had heard the feedback, but they weren't necessarily willing to change, right? So there's a lot of reasons why leaders are strong and some are not. As far as the opportunities that I have now to help create great leaders for the world, it's such an honor and a privilege, really, to be able to do that.
Wonderful. Let's talk about this tradition that you made from being a corporate employee to being a consultant. It's a big change. It is disruptive. Of course, that means we love it by nature. But of course, it's a challenge as well. What have been the most impactful challenges on you as you've made the shift from all that support, all that name identity that comes under the umbrella of a big organization, and now you've got this beautiful logo behind you, but it's not at all the same logo as the kind of things you've been used to. So talk us through that a little bit, please.
I have to say, in my own experience, one of the most difficult things about transitioning from being a corporate employee into a solopreneur was really losing that identity. And I'd worked so hard over a 30-year career to become a senior vice president in HR, be known for my global understanding of business and really driving change. I had incredible opportunities to drive very significant transformation from a digitization, from a performance improvement, performance management, teaching feedback, coaching, creating great leaders in these companies. And then one day I wasn't. So what was I? How can you bring some level of identity into your solopreneurship or into your Encore career? Because that's what a lot of the transition I'm doing with people, moving from corporate into something else, because it's meaningful. Continuing to work is meaningful. The social aspect, the emotional aspect, how do you value yourself and the impact that you're making on the world or on the people around you? And that was always important to me. But the work that makes you feel alive, that's what's important. So transitioning into MPrince Consulting, I had been thinking about it for actually about 7 years. So by design, less serendipity like the rest of my career was, where I was moving around because people tapped me on the shoulder and I got bored and said, I'm ready for a change. And somebody said, okay, here, do this. That was more serendipitous, right? But by design, I really wanted to have a plan, and working with people in over 20 countries. I had already worked in various industries, like you mentioned, healthcare, financial services, medical device, pharmaceutical, e-commerce, professional services. And coming off of that final 3-year international assignment, realizing at the senior vice president level, there was just no equitable job for me immediately to go to. I had just turned 55, and the thought of job searching felt slightly daunting. I felt like, Claire, I had maybe one more corporate role left in me before maybe thinking about retirement, another 5 to 8 years of really good strategic HR work. But I had this great conversation with my husband. He's been a tremendous influence in my career, and my dad as well, and my mom. My dad and mom were both professionals, so we had a lot of good opportunity to talk about career steps. So it seemed like the perfect time to take a leap. I took a package, so I had some financial security. I could start my own coaching and consulting firm. If it didn't work out, I could always get another job. So I decided at the end of 2019 to take that leap. I was already a certified coach since 2006. I had gotten my organizational leadership doctorate in 2015. So I don't go around calling myself Dr. Prince, but occasionally I use it when it's helpful.
Yep.
And some with credentials, right? You have to have the right credentials. And I was going out on my own. I spoke to a wonderful gentleman, Frank Wagner. He works, at least he used to, I don't know if he still does, but he works in the Marshall Goldsmith organization. I said, I'm thinking about being a coach. And he's like, tell me your credentials. And I told him, and I said, I've been coaching internally leaders since 2006, and probably in an HR capacity even earlier before the credential. And he's like, you're a coach. You already are a coach. Just go be a coach. And that's what I needed. I probably had a little imposter syndrome. It's like, who would want to talk to me if I'm not in the corporate environment where they had to talk to me? Now I had to go out and convince people. So that was a big transition. But 4 years later, here we are. I have a portfolio of work. I absolutely love the leadership coaching. I do some executive outplacement coaching as well, which is really joyful when I help people land their next roles. I can celebrate with them. I do HR consulting, and I love helping HR teams in small, medium-sized companies in particular get some great work done, some project work that they just don't have time for because they're up to their eyeballs in day-to-day alligators. And so we partner, MPrince Consulting will partner with them. I do HR tech advisory work too, because throughout my career, I've been the tech person in HR, mainly because I was part of that technology implementation. I know how to design and blueprint, and with the scoping and de-scoping and driving adoption of technology and how to help people advance through technology. So I became, by default, the HR expert in technology at these companies. And I take that now into my Encore Career as well, and do advisory work for HR tech startups who want to talk with HR people who are the buyers.
Absolutely.
And interestingly enough, HR doesn't make those decisions anymore. There's the CIO and the whole technology organization you have to bring into the conversation. Your go-to-market pitch as an HR tech firm, you have to sell HR on the why, but you have to sell the technology folks on the how. So it's a very, very interesting conversation. And the move to MPrince Consulting was by design, but the accumulation of knowledge that I was able to gain in 30 years of a career was serendipitous.
I guess it was. And I think what you're doing and saying that is that being reminded in that conversation with Frank Wagner about the fact that when you flip the switch and you go into being a coach, you do bring with you that serendipitously gained knowledge that you've accumulated. And that all feeds into your ability to bring richness of experience and metaphor and analogy and comparison to your clients. And that's what makes you the coach long before you get a certification or a stamp or a thing that says you've worked with 20 clients outside the corporate environment. And that's so important to remember, I think, for any of us going into a secondary career, whether it's Encore at the end of our lives, hopefully not too close to the end, but you know what I mean, is that, we may well be changing field in a drastic way, but that doesn't mean that all we've done up till then suddenly becomes redundant. On the contrary, it becomes highly relevant. It's just seen through a different filter.
Absolutely. Well said.
So let's flip to the other end of the spectrum and think about early career professionals. Those who are starting out, either even before they start studying because they need to choose something that's going to suit them, or they're done with their studies and they're ready to go into the job marketplace. What advice do you have for them?
I do coaching quite a bit also on the other end of the spectrum of new grads who are struggling to find their first job or are in their first job, not enjoying it as much as they thought as well. These are usually engagements with the kids of my friends
yes,
who are also
sure.
raising young adults, and they ask, can you please speak to my son, my daughter? And I gladly do. So I see a lot right now with young people of feeling like they have to have some kind of intentional career path at such a young age. And I think some of that comes from the parents' expectations. You got a degree in this, so what are you going to do with that degree? And to your point, thinking about what you want to do or what you might be passionate about, what are you really good at, could start sooner. I think in some countries, they do a better job, certainly than in the US, of career guidance and at the high school level before you go into university, because some people are not cut out for the traditional 4-year degree career.
Of course not.
Professional.
'Twas ever thus.
Yeah. One of my children followed that traditional career path. He's doing absolutely fabulous. In fact, completed his MBA already. He's 7 years out of university and doing fantastic. My other son, he would, if the high school had offered shop class, he probably would have been a great candidate for the more hands-on tactile learning. And being able to recognize that, as I did, hopefully, had a positive influence on the type of education that he decided to follow, because he did try to do the traditional 4-year degree and realizing quickly after 2 years that it was not for him, and quickly went to a trade school and is doing fantastic as well in his career, but in a totally different way. So not only advice to younger people, but I have to admit it's advice to parents. Help your kids see what's possible as opposed to trying to drive them in a certain direction. It's really hard. I do often give that advice to the parents of people I know. And for the young people themselves, really think about envisioning what your career could look like. And it doesn't have to be just one career path. It could go in multiple ways. There's a couple authors, they wrote about the squiggly career, and I apologize, I wish I could remember their names, but it's true. You can move in different directions if you feel like you have that freedom. So it really depends on whose motivations are you trying to satisfy.
Well said. All right, let's talk about your book. You've written a book called Creating Your Encore Career. What was your motivation to write it, and what need are you trying to address with the book?
First off, I had a great coach when I was moving from corporate into what I call my Encore career. And she had done the same. She had been in corporate for quite some time and moved into her Encore career as a coach. And it was very inspiring for me because we had a very similar type of work experience. And it really inspired me. And I wanted to inspire others in a similar way. There are many, many people out there, even in their 40s and late or early 50s. It's not too soon to start thinking about your Encore career, even though you feel like you're at the height of your primary career. And I realize now that, again, it was very fortunate for me that I had the circumstances that I could move into the Encore career, but it's not too soon to start planning for it. Much like you start planning for your savings for retirement. I talk to a lot of financial advisors and I say, when do you encourage people to start planning financially for their retirement? They say, as soon as possible, right? And people nowadays...
In the cradle.
Yeah.
Yes.
People with the 401ks, I mean, both my kids started their 401ks in their first job. So in their 20s, they have already started saving money for retirement. But we don't start thinking about our career in that same way, right? I'm sure you've heard people spend more time planning a 1-week vacation than they do their career.
Oh, yeah. We see it all the time. Yes. Yeah.
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 So the strategies in the book actually are applicable no matter what stage of career you're in. Frankly, I use the exact same coaching methodology with people at every age. I tailor it, customize it depending on what stage of career they happen to be in. But the building blocks for the strategy of career planning are there. Oftentimes these days, frankly, when you're burnt out, you don't even feel like you have the energy to think about what you could do next. You almost become a little bit of a walking zombie and you're just continuing to do what you're doing because it's too hard to look for another job or it's too difficult to even think about making a change. That's unfortunate and a little bit sad. And so hopefully people will be inspired by the book. And it really is very practical advice. It's step by step. It's thinking through what can you be doing? What do you want to be doing? Who do you want to be doing it with? What are you really good at? And so it hopefully will inspire people to lead a different path.
So all those what, who, why questions sound like they're the main building blocks that you're talking about. I mean, obviously, we want to encourage our listeners to read your book, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But if we were just to boil down to the main building blocks in the book, what are they?
Well, because it's written for people who are thinking about their Encore career, it really starts out with redefining what retirement might look like for you. And people are living longer. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of other people as well having conversations about longevity. And because we're living longer in a more vibrant way and healthier, and we have a lot of personal values and social and emotional values tied up in who we are at work, people will work longer. So it used to be that at 60, you felt old and you were slowing down and starting to think about doing less. But one of my clients, I love it. She said, 60 is the new 40. I'm incredibly energetic. I was able to take retirement, but I don't need to stop working. So what do you think I should be doing? And it was wonderful to have that, open dialogue. On the flip side, though, there are 10,000 Americans and many, many more others around the world turning 55, 60 because, everybody with the aging workforce and all that. And so people are saying, well, what am I going to do for the next 5, 10, even 15 years? I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. And so what should I be doing? And that's where the journey begins. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's journey is unique because, Claire, to your point, what you said earlier is my building blocks of my Encore career was all the experiences I had leading up to it. And it's the same. So the journey begins with what were your life experiences? And what did you love doing? What did you not love doing? There's a lot of self-reflection and self-assessment exercises to help people define what that is. What will you find meaningful and purposeful during your Encore career? And then it goes on chapter to chapter, providing a lot of different ideas and options to consider, because today, with the onset of technology, it's easier to freelance. It's possible from a cultural perspective where you could be a fractional leader and not work full time if you didn't want to. Project work, there's, especially for executives, a lot of companies that used to be full-time placement staffing companies are moving into that fractional leadership opportunity. But even if you're not an executive, frankly, my book was written for the everyday person, not for the executive. So really thinking about hobbies and interests that you had when you were younger, and how can you maybe turn that into a business? I mean, think about places like Etsy, or think about Shopify, or even Amazon makes it practically streamlined to start your own business because you can have a global audience thanks to technology, whereas before maybe you would have more of a local audience.
Definitely. So I'm wondering, in all the array of people that you've come across redefining their third or even their fourth quarter in this rather radical way, whether that's through those you spoke to for your book or clients that you've worked with, friends that you've been conversing with, can you think of one of them who's maybe done this in a rather impressive or exciting or radical way that would just make a convincing story to share with us to inspire those who are having any doubts at all about whether they should be thinking in this way?
What's fascinating is, depending on where you live, what country you're in, you can retire with a pension at a certain age. Even in the US, teachers, government workers, they can retire at a very early age with a full pension or even a partial pension, even long before Social Security, and that plays into the role. So a lot of it too, when you're moving into your Encore career, you really do have to think financially just a little bit. Where are you in this stage? And again, just to reflect on a personal basis, when I decided to step into my Encore career, it was a little bit scary because I had a son who was still at university or still in his trade school, actually, which was more expensive, by the way, than most of the universities around here.
Okay.
And right. So we had to have this conversation. Do we already have enough saved to help him as much as we possibly can while I'm starting up? Because in a startup career, you don't always have a lucrative first year or second year. That's just reality. And so, you have to have these conversations. There's actually a whole chapter in the book on financial advisory and how to think about preparing. I'm absolutely not a financial advisor, nor do I claim to be. So a million times in the book, it says, please talk to your financial advisor, but be prepared with these questions. And that's what I really wanted. It's a mindset shift. Also, if you have enough, what is enough? And so when I'm coaching people, if they want to move into their Encore career, that has to come into the conversation. I do want to talk about financial insecurity during retirement in a little bit. But going back to your question about having a few people who have redefined their retirement, I was working with one gentleman who had had a glorious career in the military, had worked up to a very, very high rank and very high secret clearance, had then been retired from the military and went to work for a couple very well-known data security, data privacy type companies. And I absolutely hated those experiences. He was only there maybe a year or two in each role because they were all about money. The whole capitalism made him feel yucky. He hated the way he had to justify what he thought was the right thing to do from a technology and protection of customers perspective to a board and executives who were just thinking about how does that affect our bottom line. So he says, I don't know if I can continue to work in corporate. I was like, well, let's think about this. You've been working for these kinds of companies who are solution providers, and it really is all about making money. That's why they're in business. What if you were to work for a more mission-driven company? What if you were to actually become their internal security expert, but at a mission-driven company, which is really about helping the world in some way that aligns with your passions and values? So that kind of conversation led him to a role that he never would have thought of. And today, I hope, he's enjoying his role as Chief Information Security Officer for a healthcare-oriented company that helps nurses be better at what they do. And because it's mission driven and because it's fully remote, he and his wife could move full time out of San Diego, a very high cost of living area, to the mountains of Colorado, which has a lower cost of living area. And so financially, it was less important how much he made and more important what he was going to be doing for the next 5 to 10 years. And even though he's working full time, this is more an Encore career because it's not the same type of grind as what he was in. So that's just an example. I've also worked with people, again, it's global operations leaders who were in these very high pressure roles, top line, bottom line impact type roles, who want to work for either healthcare. One of them is now a Medicare patient advocate because they wanted to continue to work, but had gone through a process with their aging parents, getting the healthcare that they needed. And they saw how difficult that was. And they realized their own parents were so important and they were so privileged, if you will, to have her guide them through that process. But there are a lot of people in this country who don't have a child or a companion or somebody to help guide them through that process. So this became her heartfelt Encore career to help as many Medicare eligible patients as possible navigate the world of healthcare. Isn't that amazing?
It's wonderful. And it's all about finding meaning and purpose, isn't it? I want to ask you one last question before we begin to close. You've given all kinds of insight and advice already, but what kind of advice would you like to give to your own 18-year-old self if you could go back and speak with her from today's perspective?
My career was kind of serendipitous, but out of boredom. I am a lifelong learner. I have this insatiable appetite for learning, growing, stretching. So every time, about 18 months into a role, I would update my resume and my husband goes, "Oh, here we go again," because I was getting bored in my role. I was very fortunate to have companies who recognized, and leaders, frankly, who recognized she's ready for something different. And if I don't move her, she's probably going to leave. I don't want her to leave. And I didn't know all that was happening. I really didn't. But probably a lot of closed door conversations about what do we have for her next, which I love. So in hindsight, I would tell myself, and I also tell the younger folks that I coach, stay curious, keep learning, be the best at what you can be, learn how the organization works, learn where opportunities are throughout the organization. Because prior to my first international assignment, I was a director for 7 years. I just kept moving around at the same level, but to different roles. And all of a sudden, when an opportunity for advancement came up, I was the one who knew the most about the enterprise because I had moved around laterally, which is okay. I was kind of money tracking at the time, Claire, because my husband was traveling a lot. I needed to stay where I was.
But you brought your curiosity.
Yeah, but still growing, right? And staying curious and keep learning. The second thing is know your worth. Because if you know the value you're bringing and you can back it up with facts and context about your knowledge and the value you bring to the organization, you're in a better place to negotiate. So knowing your worth gives you the inspiration you need and also the courage you need to ask for what you feel you deserve. And unfortunately, most women, and I do coach a lot of women in my private practice, and I help them advance in their careers. They know they're ambitious. They know they want to continue to get ahead. But when we talk about salary, what does that mean to you? Do you know what you should be asking for? And they're like, well, I'd be willing to settle for. And I was like, wrong answer. Don't let those words cross your lips ever again. Let's understand fully. And even at 18 or 20 or 24, I just encourage people to really understand. Otherwise, frankly, we're never going to close that pay gap that we all know exists, especially for women. So start out strong in your career because you can only build from that. If you are willing to take less, or if you're afraid to negotiate for more, you're always going to be behind. So I think that's critical.
Brilliant. Well, I love that. We're finishing up with curiosity and knowing your worth. That's wonderful, Michelle. Thank you. I feel that we could go on for hours and hours still, but as you know, listening is a limited resource. So let's wrap it up there. I just want to thank you so much for being so candid and generous in your sharing.
Well, it was a pleasure. And thanks for allowing me to walk down memory lane and share.
Beautiful. It was well worth it. I know everybody will find it very valuable indeed.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.